from other league members. We heard a few comments wondering why we chose tonight's topic. In September of 2024, before the election, an article on the front page of the New York Times business section discussed the development in several North American cities of entertainment and education centers devoted to our historical Western agriculture and ranching culture. Denver's National Western Center was a major focus of this article, and tonight's speaker, Brad Buchanan, was quoted several times. While Denver is often nowadays a city in nationwide news coverage, our iconic cowboy culture is not usually the topic. It got the program committee thinking that an update on the National Western Center, the bond funding for its construction, and its impact on historically disenfranchised neighborhoods that are nearby would be an interesting topic. This major expansion of Denver's infrastructure, like other expansions, is something that League of Women Voters has both supported and scrutinized, depending on whether, for example, promises of economic stimulation are met or negative impacts on transportation, housing, and gentrification occur. This is why we wanted to hear from both the CEO of the National Western Center, Brad Buchanan, and from Daryl Watson, the Denver City Council person who represents the Globeville and Elaria Swansea neighborhoods, which are most impacted by this huge build. Our local, state, and league positions on such issues as good government, planning and zoning, land use decisions, housing availability, impact on transportation, and health effects of construction underpin our decisions to review such projects as the National Western Center. To refresh your memories, in 2015, voters approved a tourism tax to fund the revamp of the National Western Center. There was concern that our traditional stock show site would move to Aurora. The funding included a new campus for CSU, a new park, an equestrian center, and more. The agreement created the basis for the Community Investment Fund to send back to its neighbors. In 2021, after COVID subsided, the City Council approved $274 million in bonds, $175 million of which would be used for continued expansion of the National Western site. League of Women Voters of Denver followed both these events closely. Before I introduce the speaker, please understand that we will be muting your audio during the presentations. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat for the speakers, and these will be monitored by Pearl Ann Zalarny, our co-director of communications, and will be posted by her afterwards. Our presentation by Daryl Watson, City Council person, was done through a Zoom interview with me several weeks ago because he is unable to meet with us in person tonight. So questions for him also please write in chat and we will send them on to him. If there is time after we get through the questions in chat, we'll open everyone's audio and you can ask questions directly. I want to make special mention and thank Marty Slovan for coordinating this event tonight. Please remember that our next briefing is the Civics 101 class, Your Federal Judiciary. It will be on Zoom on March 4th at 5:30 and is open to the public as well as members. We designed this briefing to prepare leaguers for the consensus process on the League of Women Voters U.S. proposal of a position on this third branch of government. The consensus meetings will be March 27th and March 29th. Look for details upcoming in the voter and the weekly update. I'd like to introduce our speakers now. Our first speaker will be Brad Buchanan. Brad was appointed CEO of the National Western Center Authority in 2018 and is responsible for implementing its vision. When complete, the 250-acre campus in North Denver will be a year-round global destination for culture, entertainment, education, and agribusiness innovation. Brad earned a bachelor's degree in environmental design from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. He began his career as an architect in Denver, starting his own architecture firm in 1987, and then in 2011, joining RNL Design, which is now Stantec. In 2014, during Denver's historic post-recession building boom, Mayor Michael Hancock appointed Brad executive director of Denver Community Planning and Development, engaging more than 20,000 residents in drafting Denver Right, an ambitious 20-year plan for land use, mobility, parks, and recreation. Also during his tenure, Brad and his team streamlined and modernized city permitting. As an architect, he served as the chair of the Denver Planning Board, the Landmark Preservation Commission, and the Downtown Denver Partnerships Board, and he participated in creating the original Blueprint Denver. In 1999, he founded Freedom by Design, a community service program to provide pro bono design and construction services to the low-income disabled community. Today, there are 60 chapters nationwide. He and his wife, Margaret, and their grown children own and operate the Flying Bee Bar Ranch in Strasburg, Colorado, where they raise grass-fed cattle using regenerative agriculture, a system of farming principles and practices that increases biodiversity, enriches soils, improves watersheds, and enhances the ecosystem. I'm going to introduce Daryl Watson as well at this time. And then after Brad speaks, you'll hear the video interview that I did with Daryl. Mr. Watson has served as the District 9 representative on the Denver City Council since July of 2023. District 9 includes the Globeville and Elaria Swansea neighborhoods that surround the National Western Center and have been directly impacted by its construction and expansion. These are historically underserved and underfunded neighborhoods, which have also felt the impact of the construction of I-70. Daryl Watson was born in the U.S. Virgin Islands and moved to the Whittier neighborhood in Denver in 1997. Prior to becoming a city council person, Daryl served on the Housing Stability Strategic Advisors Board and the Denver Park Trust. His continuing focus has been on housing, healthy living, including increasing green space, and public safety. I'd now like to turn it over to Brad Buchanan.
Thank you. I will share my screen here. Appreciate the introduction, and I'll try to build on some of the themes that you touched on, particularly around the process we've gone through, where we are today in the process, and also working with the community, the GES Globeville Elaria Swansea communities. I will touch a little bit on sort of where this all started, and you mentioned, Susan, what really sort of sparked this was the stock show looking at moving to the Gaylord project out in Aurora near the airport. And then Councilman Michael Hancock, towards the end of his second term as city council person in Northeast Denver, was working with the stock show and some other city leaders about how to keep the stock show in Denver. This, at that time, about 107 or 108-year-old beloved institution. Also, as you mentioned, such a representation of the major economic generator and cultural generator that is agriculture in Colorado. but also I think, and something that I feel very passionate about, focused on maintaining connections between the urban and the rural place. I'll suggest that it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this project is that living in Strasburg, living on a cattle ranch, but also being very involved in Denver and downtown Denver through the Downtown Denver Partnership. I was a planning director and all that, some of the boards and placemaking work that you mentioned. And then driving, 30 miles east and driving that whole transect from the most urban place to the most rural place. We live at the end of a dirt road, and getting to know this community in Strasburg and the community in Denver that I've been in since 1982 when I moved to Denver after architecture school, and appreciating how amazing it is that Denver, that could be possible, that we could have such a nearby and adjacent rural place, and that there could be such an exchange of ideas. There's, in today's political landscape, the urban and rural place have very different thoughts about each other. And I think the stock show is a place where that convening and sharing happens every day, every year for at least 16 days in January. I would summarize the National Western Center by trying to make that 365 days of the year. And as you mentioned, around education, entertainment, agribusiness, and Western culture. And so when I told Mayor Hancock that I was not going to stay in the planning director position for the third term, I'd been there for 5 years and thought it was somebody else's turn. This opportunity was presented, and I'm so happy that that it worked out, because I've been there a little over 6 years now, and I'm more inspired about this the campus today than the day I walked onto it 6.5 years ago. So the partners that are involved are the City and County of Denver, National Western Stock Show, and Colorado State University. Those are the founding equity partners. There are a number of other programming partners, History Colorado, Museum of Nature and Science, and that list has grown to 100 more in the last 6 or so years. But you mentioned in 2015 the 2C ballot that provided the tourism tax funding for the bonds that have happened to fund the infrastructure, and now a number of the new structures that are up, and some that are under construction, and some that are yet to come. Those from that point, the process became looking at how to design it, how we're going to work with the community, which we often refer to as our fourth partner. You mentioned that the National Western Center is sort of nested in GES, and I'll mention a few things just for context. 80216 zip code is I should probably not say the most, because I don't have the science to back it up, although there have been experts who have used that phrase, the most polluted zip code in the United States, certainly one of them. And we're not there by accident. They're not there by accident either. So in the early 1900s, late 1800s, when the stockyards were there, which attracted rail, which attracted other heavy industrial, and built downstream from town, because if you're going to build a slaughter plant and packing plants, that's what you do. You build it downstream from town. That attracted the heavy industrial that went there shortly thereafter. All the smelter plants in the early days, all of that pretty heavy industrial that polluted the air, water, and soil. That is true still today. Suncor is not far from our campus. If you are out there on a warm, breezy day, there are a number of different odors you can smell from there. We joke about playing a game called Name That Smell on the campus. There are a number of them. There also are a number of marijuana facilities around there too. So it is is an adventure for the senses. I'm going to now let's see if I can do this right. I'm going to start a video, and you should have both video and sound. This is kind of a sizzle reel we have of the campus that we just produced last year. Did the sound come through okay?
Yeah, it was perfect.
Good. So you all got to rock out there with a little National Western Center video. So I thought I would take a few minutes and kind of run through the campus, give you your bearings. Can you see my cursor at the bottom there moving?
No, I don't think we can see a cursor.
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay. At the bottom, that is I-70 running east-west.
We see the cursor now.
Okay, great. That's I-70, and this area here, which we call the Triangle, is what most people think of when they think of the stock show. This is the 1909 Stadium Arena. This is now a Denver landmark. It's this beautiful black iron, ornamental iron truss structure, beautiful brickwork underneath. And you can hardly tell anymore because it's been covered up with stucco and added on to about 5 times. It is surrounded by the expo hall, what they call the expo hall. So when you go and see all the different farming equipment and cattle equipment and all the different crafts and things, that's where the expo hall is. The cow barn is actually in the first level where all the cattle are, is underneath here today. Up northeast of that is the event center. That's where the equestrian events currently happen. And the general idea is that we are going to build new facilities west of the tracks that run from southwest to northeast. Between the tracks and the South Platte River, we're going to build new facilities. These activities for stock show will then move over to west of the tracks, and then we can start working on the Triangle. The Triangle is not funded yet. There is not a plan to fund it. In 2021, was it November of 21? We were part of the GEO bond that was floated by Mayor Hancock, and we have the inauspicious honor of being one of the first GEO bond measures to go down in many years. And I think that's important because I think it really spoke to a disconnect we were having with the community, particularly with where we were in the sequencing of the project. That we had been talking about all these wonderful things to come, and none of them had happened yet. We were in the middle of a large horizontal infrastructure project to west of the tracks. But I'll talk a little bit further in the presentation about the community efforts that we've been doing for 6 years now related to this project, but certainly things that I think have improved over the last few years since we were voted down on that 2E ballot measure. West of the tracks, I'll start kind of in terms of the major infrastructure moves. The voters and community had been very clear with the 2C ballot measure in 2015. We heard loud and clear that getting access to the river and restoring that stretch of the riverfront was really important. One of the things that had contributed to that, not only was the stockyards down there that wasn't getting much tender loving care, but there were two 72-inch sanitary sewer lines called the Delgany Interceptor that flow, basically move all the sanitary sewage from downtown and kind of all around downtown, northeast along the Platte to the Metro wastewater treatment plant. These were literally 6-foot tall pipes along the river's edge, and it created an uncontrollable swath of ground between the water's edge and these pipes of about 100 to 150 feet. And it was dangerous real estate. It had been taken over by a number of encampments, and police had only access from basically 47th and 54th. And so it was a long swath of riverfront terrain that was unpatrollable, and it was very dangerous. So we heard that loud and clear that they wanted some riverfront space. That has been completely renovated. There's now 6 acres of parks and green space and running trails and bike trails that have been a huge success on the riverfront. We also, there were rail lines through this whole center, the whole main body of this, what we call phases 1 and 2 between the tracks and the river. And all those rail lines were aggregated into a new consolidated line, the Denver Rock Island Rail Line right here up against the Burlington Northern and the RTD commuter, the N-Line commuter rail line. So we consolidated that, which really unlocked all this center area. The first thing we did was build roads. We raised the grade an average of 4 to 5 feet because much of this was in the floodplain. Fortunately and coincidentally, they were digging a big hole just to the south of us where the C70 project is now located, and they had a lot of fill coming out of there that they didn't want to have to haul very far, and we needed it. So a large portion of the excavation that formed the C70 underpass there just south of our project went to raise the average grade, like I said, 4 to 5 feet, bring it up out of the floodplain. So it was a huge overlot grading and horizontal infrastructure process. All new water, sewer, gas, electricity, data, everything new. That took about almost 3 years to do before we even started going vertical with anything. All these new roads, National Western Drive North that comes up here as a new road, new Betty Cram Drive named after Betty Cram, one of the matriarchs in Globeville, wonderful, delightful lady and lifelong neighbor in GES who actually met her husband like 70 years ago in the livestock exchange building when he was working in the stockyards, and she was a phone operator in the livestock exchange building. She just passed away about 2 years ago, but we fortunately, before she passed, we were able to have a ceremony and name the street in her honor, and she was able to be there. Then, so once we had the horizontal built, couple of things kicked off. One, at 51st Avenue, this is the first new bridge across the South Platte River in over 40 years. We received last year a federal grant, Reconnecting Communities grant, to help fund the Betty Cram Bridge at 48th. This will cross and connect to 48th and Washington, which runs out here. These were two huge moves to make because previously, and this was one of the complaints of the GES community, this is really it was a big cul-de-sac. You could get in there, you couldn't get through it. The community could not connect it, and they didn't feel welcome. They didn't have a way to drive to it, walk to it, bike to it. We are fixing all of those things, and it was very much a very well received asset when we were able to open 51st Avenue Bridge a few years ago. We are in design now on the Betty Cram Bridge. We also, as part of our Reconnecting Communities grant, number 18 here is a pedestrian bridge that will connect the campus, phases 1 and 2 of the campus, to the commuter rail platform that's on the east side of the tracks. I think those are the major sort of infrastructure moves. I will touch on here in a bit some of our sustainability work and what we did with those big pipes that we're laying alongside the river. Our first kind of vertical construction was actually the stockyards. This is a new kind of stockyards. The old stockyards that were basically in the same location held around 1,500 head of cattle during stock show, were basically vacant the rest of the year. There was also an issue because these cattle produce manure and urine, of course, and there's shavings from the cattle, the beds, and all that when it would rain would drain down into the South Platte River. Now it is all controlled. All that gets cleaned up. It gets captured in a detention basin. There is a valve that runs to Metro wastewater whenever there's any animal waste in those yards. Then when it's cleaned and it switches to its other use, the other 10 or 11 months of the year, we have festival concerts here. We have boat shows and RV shows and farmers markets and all kinds of events that happen in these stockyards. We also built our first vertical was the Stockyards Event Center. It's a 20,000 square foot kind of high bay, clear span, concrete floor arena. There's what is in January, that is for cattle shows. The rest of the year we do concerts and sporting events, the Girl Scouts annual fundraiser dinner, Museum of Modern Arts fundraiser dinners, all kinds of things, corporate events, programs with DPS happen in that space. And then the sort of southwest of that, there's a 640 seat bull hall that there's cattle auctions in January, and all manner of concerts, corporate events, symposiums, TED Talks, performance art, music art that happen in that space right there. At the same time, kind of try to go sequentially here, Colorado State University was building their 3 facilities, and I'll talk a little bit more about what CSU is, but this is CSU Spurs Terra, that's their food and ag building, Hydro, which is water resources, and Vita, which is animal and human health. Those were kind of opening about 1 year apart from each other. Number 9 and number 17 are under construction right now. Number 9 is the new livestock center. It's about a 400,000 square foot facility. It has a 3,600 seat arena in it. It'll seat about 5,500 when we seat the floor for concerts. It has cattle shows in it, and dog polls and draft horse polls and those things for stock show, and then concerts the rest of the year, sporting events. We're in conversations with CHASA about high school sporting events there and things like that. The expo, which will be the cattle barn that is currently, like I said, over here in the expo hall, will move over to number 9. during stock show. But the rest of the year, it's 185,000 square feet of expo hall space. We worked very closely with Visit Denver and the convention center to sort of offload some of the smaller, for them, kinds of convention and expo events that are perfect sized for us. This facility will be done this fall. Its grand opening will be stock show in January of 2026. The stock show headquarters, the Legacy Building, number 17, it's just, I think, going to be one of the most handsome buildings in Denver, is on the same timeline. It will also open for stock show 26. We are currently in procurement and design on the Equestrian Center. The Equestrian Center project is kind of morphed. It is an equestrian center, but we've added a hotel to it, 160 room hotel. There's also a parking structure that's part of that project that originally was conceived to go underneath this building, is going to go beside it, next to the stockyard, so it's close to our big outside events that need parking. That project will go to City Council for a credit support agreement. This is a procurement that the National Western Center Authority is leading. The contract will be with us to design and build and partially operate these facilities. And then the city will be basically co-sign on our car loan, if you will, because the National Western Center Authority is basically a startup funded with backup support from the three equity partners. Down here, number 11 is the central utility plant. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but that's where our district energy system is housed. Up here in number 15, the purple, is our maintenance and operations facility. There's a small building to the east of that that's not shown on this plan, which is where the National Western Center Authority's offices are located. Spurs, Vita, Terra, and Hydro. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend it. The second Saturday of every month, they're all open. They're actually open every weekday as well to the public. The Vita building is their animal and human health. They also have a partnership with Denver Dumb Friends League in there. The Temple Grandin Rehab Center, Equine Rehab Center is in there. They have an equestrian medical rehab center in there as well. It is an absolutely remarkable, as are all three of these really remarkable buildings, really well designed, and the amount of innovation in their programming is truly impressive. Terra, the building in the middle, it is all about food and agriculture. They have the most sophisticated soil lab between the Mississippi and the West Coast, housed in this building, along with a number of soil and food testing laboratory assets that are located there. And then the hydro is what you might think, water resources, focused on our most precious resource in Colorado, our water. There's also Denver Water has their Denver Water Lab on the second floor of this building. They have about 20 folks that work there in the hydro building as well. Again, all three of them open on the second Saturday of every month. I'll quickly move through just some of the events so you can see the kinds of things we do. This is the shot on the left is the auction hall in January, and we have all kinds of events for the rest of the year. And this is really the story of the National Western Center, to design these super multivalent, incredibly flexible spaces that can be used year-round to solve the financial challenges of the National Western Stock Show. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. The challenge was they had 16 days of revenue and 365 days of expenses. That wasn't working. And now they have 16 days of revenue and 16 days of expenses. And we manage, program, operate, and maintain the rest of the year. The yoga, all the yoga mats on the bottom right-hand corner, that's in the arena space in the Stockyards Event Center. Here's one of our white tablecloth dinners. Here's this Girl Scouts of Colorado event that we've now had 2 years, and we just rebooked again for this October. This is a community event. We have a community event program there. All nonprofits can use this space. We give a 20% discount off of our market rates for any nonprofit. We give a 50% discount to any community located nonprofit or community event. And we do a ton of these. I mean, there's probably 1 or 2 community events a month that happen already in the campus, even with just the Stockyards Event Center being the only events venue we have open. Colorado State University is the same way. They do that as well. This is Eat Local Food is an event. We've done it now 3 times. We'll do it again later this spring for the 4th time. This is where we match up large institutional food buyers with small local caterers come in, and it is a fantastic event. It's delicious food. They run it from like 11 to 1 o'clock on a Tuesday or Thursday, and you come in and you eat and taste and hear the story of each of these small restaurateurs or catering companies. It's been wildly successful and created many partnerships for some of these smaller home-based groups to expand with some more significant customers. These are corporate events. We do all kinds of corporate events all the time. This was a expo we did this last summer. It was incredibly hot. It was 102 degrees, unfortunately, over this weekend, but we still had about 6,000 people that came. This expo was all about all things vehicles electrified, and everything from electric skateboards and scooters to electric semi-tractor trailer rigs and everything in between. This is one of the festival concerts. This was a NoFX concert. We had this last summer. Had about over 2 days, 15,000 people on the campus. Very successful. We have 3 of these concerts booked for this summer. Dumb Friends League had a fundraiser here in the arena space. Here's some information on the Legacy building. This is the Stock Show headquarters, which is located faces National Western Drive. It's the 4th of the 4 corners to be completed at National Western Drive South and Betty Cram Drive. This will be their headquarters. There's a museum there of their that finally have a place to put all their incredible artifacts that they've collected over now 120 years of the Stock Show. The staff office, the corporate offices will be located there, as well as a number of dining and club and event spaces that they'll have there. It's about 100,000 square foot building. This is the livestock center I mentioned. This larger sort of low slung roof, that's the 185,000 square feet of expo hall space. This is the 5,500 seat arena space. You're just past that, you're seeing the equestrian center spot. I'll point out in this slide, this small orange brick building, that is the Armor Administration Building. This is similar to the Livestock Exchange Building. You know, back in the day, 40,000 head of cattle, sheep, and hogs coming through here on their way to slaughter, on their way to packing houses, then back on the trains to go feed the United States. And there were a couple of buildings really where all the commerce happened. The Livestock Exchange Building being the biggest of that, where our offices were located until we started a restoration renovation there 3 or 4 months ago. And then this Armor Admin Building, if some of you will remember Armor Hot Dogs, and that's where all the dollars change hand when people were bringing the hogs in to sell to go to market. The right shot is just a rendering of the central plaza between the livestock center and that's Vita in the bottom right hand corner, and then the equestrian center building. Upcoming construction, I mentioned the Betty Cram Bridge through the Reconnecting Communities grant, the equestrian center, the rail, the pedestrian bridge across the rail connecting to the end line that is terribly needed. It's one of our customers and the community's frustrations right now is that they don't have a way to get across the rail, and so that is in construction documents right now. Hopefully it will be done in sometime in 2026. And then this is some improvements down here to a rail crossing on National Western Drive South. That is an at-rail pedestrian crossing, and we're trying to put some safety improvements in there. The Equestrian Center Hotel Garage project, I mentioned that. It's located next to the river, along the riverfront open space. Equestrian Center, as I said, will sit here. There'll be a hotel, 160 rooms, is what it's shaken out to be, and a large parking structure will be located there. We'll also, as part of that, will be an adaptive reuse to the Armor Administration buildings that I mentioned. It was that orange brick building in that last aerial shot. It includes 4,000 square feet of dedicated community space that we put into the request for proposal. The development group will produce that at no cost to the community, and we will use this entire facility to match up heads and beds in the hotel along with our event space. The event space will bring room nights to the hotel, and the hotel will bring more events to the campus. So we think that's a good symbiotic relationship. This is kind of the schedule we're on right now. We hope start construction this summer sometime. I'm thinking it's late summer, and with the goal to be open sometime in 2028. Right now, I would say Q2 of 2028. We formed a task force with the community to look at the design of those community spaces I mentioned, to also look specifically at community investment fund revenue streams that can come from this project. I'll talk more about in a couple of slides about the community investment fund, and also how we can make this entire process, as we do with everything we do, a job creator and a capacity builder for the GES community. We mentioned we did a very different kind of RFP, request for proposal, in this project than I've ever seen done before, and I've been involved with a lot of them over my career. We brought the community in. Oftentimes projects happen, they get through design, and then they bring ideas. Folks bring ideas to the community and say, what do you think? And at that point, it's kind of the cake is baked. And so rather than doing that, we went to the community from the very start and said, do you want a cake at all? What do you want? What kind of cake do you want it to be? And what ingredients do you want in the cake? And created almost 300 ideas from community. It was a 4-month-long process. It was fantastic. It was really inspiring. Really embraced the process. From that, this idea of this community operated space, lots of ideas around the design. They really asked for, both in the construction project process and all the way into the operations as well, that there be opportunities for jobs. Very focused on community investment fund revenue sources, and very interested in creating community use rates. These are all low-income communities, and we want to make sure that all of our neighborhood are able to enjoy the space at a price that they can afford. This is the group that's we procured. We went through about a 15-month-long procurement. A number of different groups competed. It's headed up by Fengate. They're a real estate group out of Toronto. They're partnered with a lot of local partners, Hensel Phelps Contractors. McWhinney is a developer you might know from Union Station, Dairy Block, Sage Hotels, Walter Eisenberg and the Sage Hospitality Group, Union Station, Dairy Block, and many others as well. Oakview Group is locally based event operations group that's helping us with bookings. Perkins and Wills, the architect on the Equestrian Center. ME Engineers, mechanical for Equestrian. Martin and Martin, civil engineers. 4240 is the architect on the hotel, and Design Workshop is the landscape designer. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about what we're doing with it, what our work with the community, because this is really what drew me to this opportunity 6.5 years ago. The opportunity to truly sort of embed ourselves in a neighborhood and partner with the community around creating things that are important and impactful and useful to them. We can think we know everything we need to know, and we don't. They are such an important partner in helping to inform everything we do and how we do it. We really, 3 or 4 years ago, we coined this phrase that we are a champion for the community. And we do it by creating jobs, by using our connections, our relationships, and the scope of this project to advocate for their interests and their needs, partnering with them for the benefit of the community, participating, convening. We are a convener now more and more and more with the community, providing them this low and oftentimes free use of our spaces, providing technical assistance, providing financial assistance, and creating innovations in everything we do that improve the health and sustainability of the community and help to address and course correct some of those damages that were done in the early 1900s from the heavy industrial that happened in their neighborhoods. We've created a lot of jobs. I just got new numbers today. The actual number created is 1,200 jobs that we've created, more than 500 created in 2024 alone. We are very, very focused on spending our dollars locally. And so we have spent a lot of time working with the Center for Community Wealth Building to learn how to create opportunity and procurement postings that are answerable by local and small businesses. Oftentimes, large city procurements are very complicated. Small businesses don't even have the wherewithal of the time to respond with the kind of expertise and information needed to be successful, to be a successful submitter and to be selected. And so the larger companies they have a leg up. And so we spent a lot of time looking at how we write our procurements, and it's working. The punchline is that in 2024, 60% of the dollars we spent operating the National Western Center campus were spent on local, small, disadvantaged, minority, or women-owned businesses in 80216. That does not happen by accident. That is, I will tell you, an astoundingly high number. Usually projects of our size, they're doing good if that number is 15%. That number will drop, I'm sure, over time as we get larger and larger. Last year, that 60% was just shy of $2 million that we spent with local businesses, and will increase this year in 2026 as well. Part of this project in the framework agreement, which formed the National Western Center Authority and also defined the partnership between the city, the Stock Show, and CSU, talked about creating and standing up a community investment fund. This has been a fascinating process. I think early ideas around this were that the community investment fund was going to be for that we were going to make money, going to maybe cap and sliver some funds out to and give it away. Where we got to in talking with the community is that, again, we are not the experts for what they need. They are the experts. And we sort of came up with the idea of having the community investment fund itself be a capacity building opportunity. And so the community investment fund is now stood up, is robust and operating in the GES community. And I nor any of my staff has ever attended a community investment fund meeting. We provided technical assistance grants for them to hire consultants to help them with this, to hire attorneys, to find and partner with fiscal nonprofit fiscal agent, because they are not their own 501c3 yet. They will be at some point, I hope in the near future. To also stand up there to do their outreach to the community, to do their submittal assessment and selection process, to select the grant awardees in the community, to pay those funds out, and then to manage them. They have done this all themselves, and it is just such a fantastic thing. I'm so proud for them, and so proud of the impact that we're having. Last year, 2024, there were 13 grant awardees. This year, that was we had 90,000. It was with a $90,000 contribution we made last year. 2025, it'll be something north of $150,000. It will continue to grow year over year over year, and it's worked well. We've started with relatively small amounts, 86,000 in 23, 90 in 24, and then as they've grown and created their own capacity and expertise to be able to manage larger fund amounts and to do it really well and expertly. And now they're really onto their kind of next evolution, with some new community members stepping in to help some of the folks who have done the really heavy lifting over the first 3 or 4 years of getting the CIF stood up. We fund it through a roundup at every food and beverage point of sale, but that's just one piece of it. We also do it through every single procurement we do. When we did our campus energy system, which I want to talk about that before I close out here, but our community energy system, when we went out for our RFP, we asked for how they would contribute to the CIF. With our food and beverage concessions procurement, with our ticketing platform that we're just in the process of doing that procurement right now. Each of those will also contribute pieces of their revenue to the Community Investment Fund, as well as the fact that we contribute 10% of any and all parking revenue that we receive. For any of the events on the campus, we typically get the parking revenue when there's paid parking, and 10% of that goes to the Community Investment Fund as well. I do want to touch base on the district energy system. Those pipes that I mentioned that ran along the riverfront, that were on their way to the Metro wastewater treatment plant. At that time, I was the planning director, and we were hell-bent on burying those pipes. We knew we had to get them out of the way. And when we met with Metro Wastewater said, well, we can't bury those. Those are above grade for a reason. Yes, those are sewer lines, but mostly what's in those sewer lines is not waste. It's hot water, because every time you run a sink or a clothes washer or dishwasher or shower, that hot water goes down into your sewer lines and runs through those pipes. That's mostly what's in there. Like 99% of what's in those sewer lines is hot water. And so wastewater treatment is to clean the waste before it can go into the South Platte River and make that water clean again. But it is also significantly about cooling the water, the effluent, so that it matches the temperature of the South Platte River and doesn't harm the ecology in the river. Well, there were some smart engineers from CSU in the room, and smart engineers with the city, who said, wait a minute, there's thermal energy in those sanitary sewage lines? Yes, there is. The long story short is that we created a heat exchange system. It's located in that central utility plant building, and 1.4 million square feet, when we are built out with the equestrian center, livestock center, all those buildings that I showed in phases 1 and 2, 1.4 million square feet of new vertical construction, all heated and cooled with the waste thermal energy from 2 sanitary sewer lines. It's kind of magic. It is virtually a carbon-free system, and it has it operates through simple heat exchange, and we either put heat into it or pull heat out of it to create heating and cooling that run to heat pumps in each of the individual facilities. The only energy we're buying is the electricity to run the pumps. And we try to buy green electricity that's either solar or wind generated to make the system as close to carbon free as possible. It has been wildly successful. We were a engineering news record project of the year 2 years ago. We have people coming from all over the world to see the system. It's the largest system in North America, and we believe actually on the planet. And a lot of cities are looking at this technology to adopt in their cities as well. My last slide is if you're interested in getting information, we have a text message platform. If you text NW Center to 21,000, we will send you an appropriate, and I promise you, not obnoxious number of texts about what's going on, what events are going on in the campus. This is also, to a great extent, how we communicate with the GES community. They love to communicate by text, and we give away free tickets for events to the community. We make them aware of job postings. We make them aware of procurements and opportunities on the campus. We use this quite a bit. So I think the last slide is just some of our social media platforms. We have a pretty robust Facebook presence, X, Instagram, and LinkedIn as well. And I am happy to answer any questions now or whenever you would like me to. And I will.
Well, first of all, I really want to thank you, Brad. That was a great presentation. In Zoom, you can't necessarily hear clapping, but maybe there are airwaves going your way. The warmth of our hands on this cold night clapping.
My pleasure.
Thank you ever so much. Our plan was to now show the Zoom interview that I did with Daryl. Is it okay to proceed with that? And then I think there are some questions in chat. And after we hear please continue to put your questions in chat for Brad. And let's have Pearl Ann show us the interview with Daryl Watson. I don't hear the sound, Pearl Ann.
Hey, Pearl Ann, I think you're going to have to do what I had to do. When you go to share your screen, there is a little box you have to check that's off to the right side that says share the sound or something like that. Do you see that?
Sorry, I'm trying to turn it off. Be back in a second here. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. Hang on just a second.
Another option that occurs to me is that we ask Brad questions here. I'm looking at the time. And if you can't get it up with the sound tonight, that we put the interview I did with Daryl on our webpage. Should I ask one of the questions from chat, Pearline?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, Sue, I'm still
Sure.
trying to get the other
So
thing
this is
going.
from Alicia. Brad, building on the rural-urban agriculture connection, what opportunity do you see to connect or to support food deserts in urban Denver?
That is such a good question. So I think there are different scale opportunities. Let's start from the smallest. We at the National Western Center are doing a whole bunch of programs around urban gardening, urban farming, both, at the home garden scale to micro gardens in containers. We just opened up a farm box container on the campus that we're working with focus points in their Huerta Urbana urban farming program that they have with residents. They're going to raise food in the container farm box, and then it will provide produce for the restaurants on the campus and local restaurants. So I think these small moves, they're high touch and they take a lot of work, but I think they are the gift that keeps on giving. And that the GES community in particular, and I think this is true for every community in Denver, honestly, but it is heavily Hispanic in GES, and their culture is around farming and ranching, equestrian, and I think there's tremendous opportunities on these smaller scales to do things. In addition to that, I think we need to have a conversation. What is the food we want to eat? How are we going to create healthy foods for our communities too? Not just, we have to feed a lot of people. I mean, one of the major questions and challenges that the National Western Center is all about is how are we going to feed 10 billion people in 2050 in a way that is sustainable for our planet and sustainable for all of us. And it's just that is just an ongoing conversation right now. I mean, that is what CSU Spur is all about. Certainly the Terra building is all about that. How do we do it in ways that conserve water? How do we farm and ranch in Colorado? We're a high mountain plains desert. I mean, this is not like ranching in Bluffton, Georgia at all. And they're very different landscapes and ecosystems. So I think that the National Western Center at its core is about the future of food, and that's our job from a programming perspective. We have been and are and will be for a bit more here, really focus on standing up these venues and these assets and these facilities. But we are beginning to turn that tide, and as these buildings open up, really have programming opportunities to launch education, experiential opportunities. CSU is doing it all the time already, and we're trying to do it programmatically, sort of hyper locally in GES. But that is a great question. I think really at the core of what we're all about.
Thanks, Brad. The next question came from me, and this comes from my having lived for a while in New York City. And they have a program to get kids out of New York City and into nature during the summers for disadvantaged kids. Is the National Western Center or CSU or any of the entities there considering summer programs for kids such as this?
CSU does a whole host of summer programs, most of them there on the Spur campus. Some of them are remote. I would say they're not like internships that I've seen from CSU yet, at least. We have worked with a number of partners. One that pops to mind is a group called Quivera. They started in New Mexico. They've now expanded into Colorado. They have a young farmers intern program, and this is for kids, disadvantaged neighborhoods, low-income communities that have an interest in agriculture, and they create internships with like-minded farmers and ranchers in Colorado. I think they had 25 or 30 in 2024. Basically, go from March, April to October, November, placing these kids and who show an interest in learning about and potentially progressing into agricultural jobs and want to get that kind of expertise. The stock show, it's the stock show is an interesting organization. I've been involved in the stock show for many years, but certainly have gotten to know them really well in the last 6 years. The stock show is very focused on education, and that it's sort of a unsung part of what they do. They do a tremendous amount of programming around education, and I would say most of it is pretty grassroots. They don't have any formal internship programs, but they just happen kind of by osmosis. The kids that come up through 4-H from all over the state who get to know CSU, get to know the stock show, get to know farmers and ranchers, and things come out of those relationships and those partnerships. It's so fascinating to me. Like I said, we've been going to the stock show for forever. My son showed cattle there for 2 years at the stock show, and now in my role, getting to know the stock show intimately, and I'm there every single day these years. Those 16 days, it's just fascinating to me. City folks want to know everything about farmers and ranchers and ag kids. And ag kids are coming in and they're just like, it's like this sparkly, shiny city, maybe not totally sparkly and shiny, but I think sometimes it seems like that, hopefully getting sparklier again. But, they're just like this voracious appetite to learn and talk, in this respectful conversation and exchange that happens. That's what the National Western Center needs to be 365 days a year, folks. I talk to farmers and ranchers out here all the time, and I remember the one guy joking saying, I get a nosebleed if I go west of E470, and that's not good, right? There's such an incredible asset in the city, and so much to offer, and conversely, folks don't know where their food come from. And I mentioned we're a cattle ranch, and we do ship 2 steaks and 5 pounds of ground beef if you want it, but if you want a quarter, half, or whole, you got to drive out to Strasburg to pick it up. You come out to the ranch and you meet the cowboys here, and you meet my son who works here, and my daughter and my wife who work here at the ranch, and we talk to them about how we get beef into a vac sealed package, because they don't know that. And that is creating this divide between the urban and rural place, not appreciating understanding what it takes to make their food. And it also makes consumers vulnerable to greenwashing of being told what they want to hear about, cheap food ingredients and cheap proteins. And there are health outcomes that come from this. We 4 or 5 months ago, I remember I went into the office early one morning, and I wanted to go buy have some breakfast stuff around my office. And I was looking for a grocery store, and I had to go to the Walmart up in Commerce City. And you walk into that Walmart, and these are low income communities around there, and I couldn't find anything I was looking for low carb stuff and vegetable. I couldn't find it. It was cheap. It was all cheap, but it was not healthy foods. And then we wonder why low income communities have such high rates of obesity and heart disease and all these negative health outcomes. boy, there's nothing that's a very long answer to your very short question, so I apologize. But I think they are so related. All of us thinking about and asking the important question, what is it that we are going to put in our body? I mean, we wouldn't take a syringe and stick it in our arm without knowing what's in it, but we will open a package and eat something without really knowing what's in it. And it is the same thing. Food is either medicine and helping us, or it's poison and it's hurting us. And there's a lot of cheap foodstuffs out there that we need to do better with. And that comes by building relationships. That comes by educating people about educating the consumer on both the health benefits and the health risks of what they consume and their family consumes, and understanding and valuing the rural place, particularly in Colorado, when it's such an economic generator, but also such an important part of our culture and our history.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. Pearl Ann tells me that the video with Daryl Watson is ready.
Well, let's hope, right?
Fingers crossed.
Let me know right away if it doesn't work.
So tonight we have with us virtually council person Daryl Watson, who represents neighborhoods including Elaria, Swansville, that are the near National Western Center. And part of our program tonight is to really learn more about how such a project, which can be labeled progress and wonderful, can have impacts on people who live nearby or on diverse populations that are maybe unintended or could be very positive or could be negative. So that's why we've invited you tonight to talk to us, council person. So I'll pose some questions, but feel free to branch out from these to talk about what you feel is important. What was promised by the then mayor and the National Western Center developers to the people living in the neighborhoods that abut the complex? Have these promises been fulfilled?
Thank you so much, Suzanne, for having me, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for your engagement and ensuring that community members are informed on the issues important to them and to the communities that they live in, and that elected officials like myself are able to bring forward their thoughts, ideas, and some of the facts impacting issues of import to them. When you ask of the then mayor, are you speaking to Mayor Mike Johnston or Mayor Mike Hancock? And I want to be clear, I don't speak on behalf of either of those folks. So if you don't mind clarifying who you're speaking of, and then
I'm just talking more about a time frame that happened before you were on the city council. What do you know about what was promised? Is that okay to phrase it that way?
I can absolutely share that, Suzanne, and I think that's a valued question. What I will share to folks who will be viewing this is my understanding of the framework agreement with the Global Elaria Swansville communities in collaboration with National Western Complex and the myriad of other intergovernment agreements that are encapsulated within the framework. If we're discussing specifically the triangle, that last piece of land that's referred to as a triangle that's abuts the National Western Center, there are three things that are stated within the framework. And the framework is the contract for the agreement for how that entire complex works. Part of that framework agreement was a new 10,000-seat arena to replace the facility of the Coliseum. The Coliseum is one of our oldest auditoriums, arenas. It's very well used. I was at the MLK Bill Pickett Rodeo the other night at that Coliseum. It's aging, and for us to remain competitive with the work that we do within National Western, the framework identified a replacement of that old Coliseum with a new 10,000-seat arena. The renovation and reuse of the historic 1909 arena, that is another piece of that property that was highlighted and elevated as part of the framework agreement and additional expo hall and space. And this is to continue the work of the National Western Center. There are specific funds tied to how the National Western Center reinvests dollars and how they expand the services currently provided. And the existing expo hall is small, and the framework considered those changes. So those were the three things from my understanding of the framework, from my briefing of the framework with the National Western Complex, and my discussions with the community groups, whether it's the working group or the GS Coalition. These are the three things that I've communicated from my understanding of the framework. I apologize, Susan, I believe you're on mute. Seems they're still on mute. There you go.
What are the primary impacts, both positive and negative, on the people living in Globeville and Swansea area? Jobs, economic activity, housing, traffic and transportation, air quality, possible internships or apprenticeships at the CSU Spur. How has it impacted people who live nearby?
Well, I'll say it's two-part. First and foremost, there's a long history of mistrust and between the communities and the National Western Complex. Obviously, this land belonged to the community, all of it. And prior to that, obviously, the nations that lived here on this land. With the onset of the National Western Complex, there has been a historic mistrust. One of the things that the complex has strived to do, and as the city council person that I have tried to ensure that this is occurring, is that from the National Western Center as well as from CSU Spur, that there are specific community benefits that are provided. I won't be able to quote because I don't have the information directly in front of me, but obviously my office can provide the exact numbers to your team, Suzanne, but specifically for scholarships. When it comes to CSU Spur, ensuring that their scholarships are directly targeted to Globeville, Elyria, Swansea community members to ensure that they have access to CSU Spur or any of the CSU campuses. The National Western Complex also have a very specific scholarships for residents that live in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea. Within the focus on construction, on development of any of the outlying properties that are still being built, there's a hotel and there's some other items that are coming on board shortly. Having the opportunity for folks that live within those communities to receive the bids on construction, that's also has been a part of this process. What's also vital in the discussion of some of the infrastructure support, like the larger auditorium, et cetera, that I started off with speaking, there's a community investment fund that provides a roundup of dollars spent within the National Western Complex, and those dollars come back to the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea communities. That roundup, I think, provided, I think it was close to $82,000 last year, which is a small amount. The expectation is for that roundup calculation to include more than just simply city-owned buildings within a National Western Complex, but also to be a part of some of the Denver Arts and Venues buildings, like the arenas, and for that to be a part of the calculation. That will expand the width and breadth of direct investments that's actually led by the community. It's not something that the city identifies how those funds are spent. It's going to be identified by community members from many of the community groups. So those are some of the ways that I believe that funds have been provided directly to community members through scholarships, through jobs, through the opportunities for additional work opportunities, and then direct funding from the CIF. I would be remiss if I did not add the federal dollars that are being provided to create bridges, literally and figuratively, but bridges between the communities that the National Western, that complex itself, has segregated from Elyria, to Globeville, and to Swansea.
Right.
For the Department of Transportation Infrastructure, I believe it was $35 million to build bridges, streets, and roadways to increase connectivity throughout those communities. Without National Western Complex leveraging those funds, most likely that would not have been available.
Good, thank you. And you covered one of my questions, which was about the Community Investment Fund.
Yes.
Has the
And I'll
Office
say,
of Work?
Suzanne, to add to that,
Go ahead.
I met with the Community Investment Fund team, and their questions and requests for clarity on how that roundup is calculated. I've sent that information on to National Western. I expect to receive a response back within the next 5 days. And so you're recording this. So this is the 22nd of January. So by the 27th of January, I expect to have a response. I also want to have a clear determination of what other activities that are happening in National Western that aren't within the city-owned properties and National Western-owned properties, I should say, that will be a part of that calculation. And it's my expectation that across all of the events that happens on that campus, the calculation should exist, and those funds should be directly invested into the CIF so that the community determines where those funds go.
If you could share that information that you're going to receive in a few days with us,
Yeah.
I'll present it the night of the briefing.
I sure will.
So just let me know. Has the Office of Workforce Development found that jobs were created for diverse populations, for people of color and women as a result of the center being located where it is?
I am not certain, Suzanne, and I could ask them to provide an update, a briefing on that. I have not received a briefing. I would just say, just based on where they're at and the targets of the communities within Global Elyria Swansea, it has to have some level of impact. I don't know what their specific target goal was for what should have been met for them to describe as success. But I think having it in the community itself, selecting this space instead of a space downtown, instead of a space in some other community, but in a community that has been disadvantaged, I think is important.
Good. Do you see any negatives, or have your constituents reported negatives coming out of having the National Western Center abut their neighborhoods?
I think obviously when you have a space like this that that encourages folks to be a part of, whether it's the National Western Stock Show over the last 16 days, or just ongoing folks coming into a community that has not over decades or over generations received direct investment from the city on a ongoing systemic way for sidewalks, for libraries, for grocery stores. And you see this investment coming into this space that many folks may not have felt welcome to. Yes, I believe that is could be seen as a negative, and the community has clearly communicated that is and has been a negative. I think one of the steps for a leader, at least an elected official that listens to community, is for me not to communicate what folks should feel, but for me to, within the powers of city council, to transition some of that funding, some of that focus back to the community. And that's the work of my office, focusing on the RISE bond on Washington Street to make sure that sidewalks and are built out and built quickly, making sure that within Denver Parks and Rec and the Denver Parks Trust that we're investing in new parks, in which we are within this community, working with Denver Public Library to open up a fantastic new library within a deed restricted guaranteed affordable housing for the next 99 years, to have a library added to that in a collaborative fashion. Those are things that we as city council can do. The perception of whether the city is listening and being responsive to Global Elyria Swansea will be up for the neighbors to say if that's what they feel. But I do know from my office and my collaborative process with Tierra Colectiva, my collaborative process with all of the organizations throughout the Global Elyria Swansea communities, from Focus Point and on, we have tried to lean in, to listen, and to provide direct investments in that community. And I think we have a record of demonstrating that that can be done, and that it is being done, and that the National Western Complex can be a part of that solution. And it is my hope that over time, that neighbors will begin to feel the outcomes of some of this investment.
We're going to pause Daryl's presentation and my interview with him. I think there are only a couple of more minutes, but I'm seeing people beginning to leave, and I don't. We will put all of Daryl's interview up on our webpage, and I want to have enough time to see if anybody has any absolutely important questions that they have to ask Brad, that they cannot possibly go to sleep tonight unless they ask him. Anybody put your hand up if there's something you absolutely want to pose to Brad. Otherwise, we can obviously have any of you give us questions at the Denver League office that we can send on to him. I think you could see that quite a bit of what Brad talked about the Community Investment Fund was discussed by Daryl. There is clearly the need for the community to continue to develop a trusting relationship with this great big entity that's there in the middle of it. And Brad spoke about hoping to continue to do that. I found this to be a really good update and learned a lot about what is up there, not just in that triangle, but beyond that triangle, and what possibilities are already being provided by the National Western Center. I think I'll encourage unit leaders to see if their units would like to go up to visit the campus when the weather is not 10 degrees outside on, I think it's the second Saturday of the month. I think that would be a good thing for us to do. And we want to thank Brad for his presentation. I think you have given us a lot of good information. And I appreciate the time that you've taken tonight and appreciate the contributions that the National Western Center is making, both to Denver's economy, but also to try to rebuild some of what has been lost or not paid attention to in the communities that are your neighbors up there at the National Western Center. So thank you so very much for joining us tonight. We very much appreciate your being available.
Can I add one thing before we sign off?
Absolutely.
So I don't know, did Daryl send, we did send the data that they were looking for on the, did he ever send that to you?
No, he did not.
Okay, if you're interested, I'd be happy to send you what we sent him on that. It was, they were asking for more detail about the sources of the Community Investment Fund. We sent that over to Daryl. Daryl's been I think a fantastic partner and really been we're able to communicate with him, and the previous council person we had just almost no communication with. It was challenging, and so that alone and he has very much impressed me, and I think we're going to get a lot of good things done together. He touched on it, you know, and I don't know exactly over what period of time, but you know, those blocks east of the tracks were part of Elyria. They were part of that community, and those residents were basically forced to sell. They were paid market rates, but they were nonetheless forced to sell when they didn't want to sell. And there is that hurt and distrust is never going to go away. And we choose to just show up and to they don't, anything with the words National Western in it gets sort of conflated with that. And we just work to do the right thing, keep our oars in the water, do what we say we're going to do every single day. And slowly but surely, one relationship at a time, we're making progress there. And it's so important. It's the most challenging part of the National Western Center. And to me, the most important part of the National Western Center.
Thank you for those closing words. I appreciate that. And we'll pass what you said on to back on to Daryl. Thank you, everyone who hung in there, and we appreciate it. Please come to our next briefing about the Civics 101 educational program about your federal judiciary, which is clearly in our news a lot these days. Thanks again. Take care. Stay safe, stay warm, and thank you, Brad. Good night.
Good night, everybody.